A word of warning, this podcast explores graphic and disturbing stories and includes some strong language. It therefore may not be suitable for our young listeners or other folks who may find it disturbing. Hello and welcome to True Crime Daily, the podcast covering high-profile and under-the-radar cases from across the country every week. I'm your host, Ana Garcia. Our cases this week both involve deadly love triangles. You remember the yoga teacher accused of murdering a pro cyclist who had an affair with her boyfriend, and then she fled to Costa Rica and avoided capture for nearly 6 weeks? Well, her trial started this week, but she almost got away again. She managed to get out of custody and run away days before trial was set to begin. But first, a British woman receives India's harshest punishment after a conviction for the murder of her husband, while the murder was unspeakably evil, occurring in front of their 9-year-old son. The judge took special offense at how the woman treated her mother-in-law during the trial and made her pay for that at sentencing. The judge said that he did it for all the mothers out there. The defense shot back saying, if we hanged every woman in India for abusing her mother-in-law, there wouldn't be many of them left. We are recording this on Wednesday, November 1st of 2023. Our guest today is Mike King, a former police investigator specializing in profiling and mapping, an author of 2 books and host of Profiling Evil, the podcast and the YouTube show. Welcome, Mike. How are you?
I am well, Anna, and thanks so much for letting me come back. I just love the chance to be here.
Oh my gosh. You know, every time I turn on court TV or, frankly, any crime show, I see you. So I don't even know how you have time to join us on the podcast when you're so busy, Mike.
There would be nothing that would get in the way of being on this show with you. I think this is great. And I know there are big things happening on True Crime Daily. So thanks again.
Yes. Before we get to our cases, we just want to let everyone know that this is like a really huge day because we are going to have one of our subscribers, one of our listeners, going to join us later in this podcast during the comments section. Remember, we said we wanted to celebrate hitting the 5 million subscriber mark on YouTube, and we wanted to celebrate with one of you. So we're going to have one of you on. I'm so excited. She's a semi-professional badminton player who listens to us as she's driving to and from practice every week. I love it.
That is really fun, isn't it? I can't wait to hear what she has to say. And congratulations. I mean, holy cow, what a milestone. 5 million. Wow.
Yeah. And I thank all of you. I don't take you for granted. I know that you make time for us every week, and I'm truly appreciative of that. And I hope that you feel appreciated. Okay. Thank you. Let us get to our cases this week because, you know, these are very serious topics that we discuss, and they both involve, these cases, love triangles. I say it on every podcast that involves a love triangle. I say it on 2020. I say it to anybody who interviews me. I say, love triangles never end well, people. Never end well. And the ones we hear about on True Crime Daily end in murder. It's horrific. It's a really serious thing because the thing, Mike, is when it comes to like these love triangles and the revelation that your loved one has been cheating on you, you don't know how someone is going to react to that level of betrayal. It's a little different than stealing money. This is stealing your heart. It's unpredictable.
Exactly. And I'll tell you, it's so troubling to me, the fact that it creates this sense of distrust in every angle of your life. You start looking at your finances. I'm not speaking from experience, by the way, but just from what I've studied on this thing, you're looking at your finances, your core of friends. You're looking at people that your companion is speaking to. You then start violating rights of sneaking into looking at phones and computers, and holy cow, the paranoia must be intense as it comes to revelation for the person who's being cheated on. But imagine looking over your shoulder constantly if you're the one doing the cheating.
Yeah. All right, let's get to our first case, which is out of India. And this one caught my attention because it's really very unusual about the justice part of it. The crime is horrific, but it's what the judge did in sentencing this convicted killer, the wife here, because he didn't like the way she was acting during the trial and found her so mean and disrespectful and vicious to her mother-in-law, the woman whose son has been murdered. I found that so fascinating that even in his ruling for sentencing, he addressed it.
And you think about the U.S. versus, I guess, India in this particular case. Number one, that kind of nonsense would never be introduced as reasons for punishment. It's the perfect appeal, if anything else, and to allow the emotion to come into this case. There were enough horrendous things in this case alone without having to even bring that up. And I'm still scratching my head, Anna. I'm so glad we're covering it.
Yeah, I really am fascinated by this case because, India also does things very differently. Like we have perp walks here, and that's when you see the suspect, either being handcuffed or with all the chains as the man or the woman is being moved from, let's say, one facility to a car, from a car to a courthouse. In India and in some other countries, they take the perp walk to a whole other level where they literally parade the suspects out. And they did that in this case with this woman and her lover. They were both accused of murdering her husband. Both have been convicted. So it's a different approach. And here's the other thing. I mean, when we talk about India and women's rights, especially, this is not one of the top countries that respects women's rights here. Again, this is a very interesting case. Let's get to it. So the wife is the convicted killer here. She's 38-year-old Ramandeep Kaur Mann, who is facing death by hanging for the murder of her husband, who was 34 years old at the time, Sukhit Singh. Now, the murder took place in September of 2016. It's been some time to get this case to trial. The couple from Derby, England, they were visiting his mother, the husband's mother, in India. They were here for a month-long holiday, and specifically in the Banda area of India. And the couple took their two sons with them on this holiday, two boys, ages 6 and 9. Now, Ramandeep and Sukhit were married in 2005, and they lived in Derby with their kids. He was a truck driver, and police say that the wife was having an affair with the husband's best friend, his best mate since school. This is trouble. No good could come of this. You're shaking your head for those of you listening. Mike is shaking his head.
Yeah. I mean, why does it always have to be this way too? Again, I talked about trust in the very beginning. Imagine someone that's a lifelong friend now being involved in this.
Yes, this is a very messy love triangle. The best friend here, who's the lover, is Gurpreet Singh, and he was going to meet up with the family during this month-long holiday. Not unusual, right? If you're the best friend, it's not unusual to visit the family and your buddy. So the affair between the wife and the best friend began a year earlier when they all vacationed in Dubai. After the affair began, the lover and the wife, continued their communication secretly through WhatsApp. Now, the wife's version of events here is that she asked her husband for a divorce and that he refused. Ramandeep said that her husband was a devout Sikh, and while the religion does allow for divorce, he insisted that marriage was that marriage is something that is very serious. We must work on it, and he was not willing to divorce. Now, prosecutors said, yeah, that really wasn't the issue. The issue was that Ramandeep, the wife here, was motivated not only to be with her lover, but to collect $2 million in a life insurance policy and $100,000 in assets. That was the motivation.
Yeah, and 2 million British pounds. So kind of inch the dollars up even a little more. And I'm wondering, how on earth did she get a life insurance policy that huge on him without him knowing? So that couldn't have been too much of a surprise, because I would have thought there would be at least some kind of health questionnaire in order for him to do that. But again, we start to see money as the motivator behind all these things. And maybe not even as much about love as money, as we learn more and more about kind of her personality and how she likes to glitz it up.
Yeah, this is so troubling. It's because, again, there are children involved here. And their family is about to be torn apart in the most horrific way. Father murdered, mother about to be hanged. That's it. And the fact that the oldest son witnessed what happened to his father and testified against his mother. Oh, the amount of trauma that has been forced upon these children based on the selfish acts of this mother. Not a mom.
Yeah, and Anna, you talked a little bit about this exploitive nature of the perp walk, where they put these defendants in front of the public. They almost pose like someone who's been on a trophy deer hunt with their prize, police and prosecutors around them, and you see all of this going on. But then I was really troubled as I thought about an image I saw from the Daily Mail that was taken at the crime scene, where police are looking at the body. And go ahead, finish this one out.
No, you finish, Mike. I agree with you.
It was so traumatizing to me to think of this 6-year-old and 9-year-old child standing in the room while mom's sitting on the bed with her legs kind of tucked up behind her, and they're all looking at the dead body with the police. I'm thinking, and this wasn't someone who died in their sleep from natural causes. This was a brutal murder.
Yeah. Ultimately, they ended up slitting his throat. Horrific crime. So, police say that the family trip to India was part of the premeditated act of this murder. The reason is, the police claimed, and this came out in court, that the wife and the lover believed that if they committed the crime in India, they would have a better chance of getting away with it, because they were planning to bribe their way out of paying for the crime.
Isn't this crazy? And
yes.
And number one, if you're gonna sedate somebody and then smother them with a pillow, do you really need to slit their throat and reduce your chances of getting away with murder? I mean, the whole thing is crazy, and it kind of shows something we talk about a lot, and that was how organized criminals, organized thought processes, once an event starts to unfold and the adrenaline starts pumping, can quickly become disorganized. And thankfully that happens, because it leads to evidence that can allow us to convict people of murder.
One bad decision after another, by no means supporting the right way to carry out a murder, but clearly none of this made sense. None of this made sense. And fortunately, it made it possible for the police to gather evidence. Now, the wife has said the whole time, and has said through her defense, that she was set up and, she didn't get a fair trial. She's been really complaining about her conditions because she's in one of these really old, like we're talking 200-year-old prison from the time of British rule. And she says the conditions are horrific. Hello? What are you expecting? The Marriott? What?
Yeah, and looking at those conditions, it is kind of horrifying to think about that. I saw one report that said 55 women in one cell, and they're sleeping on the floor. That's a big jump from the fantasy life that she was living to the realities of where she is today, and probably what her future will look like.
That's right. That is right. Okay, let's get.
Can I ask you one thing, Anna? Yeah. I was really kind of troubled too. How I like to look into the behavior of these crimes, and And what I'm seeing are reports out there that suggest that the husband may have confronted her about this affair that was going on even as much as weeks before the murder. If that's the case, why is the boyfriend invited to come on a family trip again?
Oh, because I think the husband had a few choice words for the best friend. That's what I would think.
Yeah, maybe so.
That's what I think. I think if you, or two things, either the husband who's suspicious of the wife and, confronts her. The question is, did the husband know that the other man was the best friend? So if he didn't know, then of course the best friend is coming. And if he did know that it was the best friend, then I think he wants to talk to his best friend about what the hell have you been doing with my wife? I know I would want to confront my best friend about it. I mean, maybe you would say, I don't want to see you here. I don't want you to come here. But maybe he wanted to talk to the guy face to face. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's why I love true crime, because it's all about human nature and human behavior. And everyone reacts to situations differently. And I'm always so curious and sometimes perplexed by the reactions, the choices that people make. Like, what would I do in that situation? I don't know if I would confront my best friend, or maybe I'd get her on the phone right away is what I would do. I don't know what I would do. I don't know.
It's interesting because it makes me think back, and this is dating myself, but to the Kaczynski Unabomber case. And I remember Dr. Fred Cowie saying to me one night, as I said, it's just not making sense, Doc. And he said, it doesn't make sense to you, but it makes perfect sense to them at the moment they're doing it, which is an interesting angle.
Yes, that's just it. And that's the fascinating part. And for me, the disconnect, to not be able to cross over, to see it through their eyes. It's so hard.
Yeah.
Let's get to September 2nd of 2016. Police say Ramandeep, now this is the day of the murder, Ramandeep drugged the entire family by lacing a dish of curry biryani, as opposed to maybe just, I'm not going to say poisoning, but drugging certain individuals. It's like whoever eats the dish, they're all going to become sedated. And I guess the whole point was to sedate everyone so they would be kind of groggy, go to sleep early, and they could carry out the murder. Why carry out the murder in the home? This is the part I don't get. I think another location would have been better, but again, so that was the plan. And who is the one person who did not eat this dish?
Yeah, if you're in a bad relationship and somebody's serving you something, maybe you should ask them to try it first.
Right. Well, everyone had it except for the oldest boy, the 9-year-old. He didn't, remember, and he witnessed what happened.
And mom, obviously.
Oh, of course, mom. Mom needed to keep her wits about her, for heaven's sake. She's about to kill her husband. So she needs to be focused like a laser beam here.
Yeah, the little boy was having like kind of a tummy ache or something, which may have created a witness to solve this whole thing.
Absolutely. One that she did not count on. And maybe she didn't expect her son to betray her. I don't know. What do you think if you're killing his father, in front of him? What other choice does this little boy have?
Well, yeah, in such a patriarchal society too, to go in thinking he wouldn't turn on her unless there was some systemic abuse or something going on in the family, and it was orchestrated in some way to do that. But even the response we're seeing since then, it very much is about the patriarch in the home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So by 10 p.m. that night, most everyone was asleep, and police say Ramandeep let her lover, the best friend, into the home. The pair went upstairs to the bedroom where the husband was sleeping. And the husband was sleeping and his 2 boys were also on the bed. But I guess they just assumed that the boys were sleeping and wouldn't wake. So the first attempt to kill the husband was by trying to smother him with a pillow. And for whatever reason, they got frustrated with that. And so Gurpreet, this would be the best friend and lover, slit his best friend's throat with a butcher knife that he brought to the home, say police. According to reports, Sukheet was killed instantly, as one would think, bleeding out. Can you imagine next to your two sons?
No, and you go back now and look at this from a behavioral perspective, and the smothering could have accomplished the job. I mean,
I think
maybe not
so.
with a pillow. Maybe you have to put your hands on their mouth and nose. But if he's sedated, they could have pulled this thing off. So it really teaches us a little bit about what was going on in the dynamic of the relationship and the anger involved, and whether she was in some way encouraging or he was just acting out anger that he felt. It again takes me away from this idea that it wasn't all about money. Could have been, but there was a whole lot of anger involved in that murder.
Yeah. And, the whole concept of he refused to give her a divorce. Well, they're British citizens. So they would be subject to British law because they're British citizens. And she could just file for divorce and be done with it.
Exactly. There
It's
was
not
an
India.
easier path.
Exactly. So I think that's probably why police are saying, look, we're just not buying that story. There's so much more to this.
Amazing. She would have got away with this, in my opinion, if they hadn't pulled that knife out and did this. They could have got away with him just dying of natural causes in some way. Again, I don't know what forensically the police would have done in that location, but chances are they could have snuck one by. But holy cow, you kind of change the whole fabric. And then, of course, this child waking up. What an absolute nightmare.
It is. I think you're right there that they probably could have slipped this one by, or in that case, this plan of theirs to bribe
There you go.
police officials maybe would have worked in that case where it was like, well, but you can't turn your head from this kind of a murder. And to do it in front of children is, I think, just makes it obviously that much worse. So the whole plan was that these two were going to run away. So here's how that went down. The wife was still around, but she was planning her getaway. The lover made it as far as the airport. He was headed back to Dubai when police picked him up at the airport and held him because clearly he was also under suspicion. This case made huge news in India. Top story for years because it's horrific, it's graphic, it's disturbing, it's everything you can imagine. So the trial itself was also explosive because here you now have a young man who's 16, her oldest son, a 16-year-old testifying against his mother about murdering his father. So huge case.
Oh my gosh.
Here is what the 16-year-old said, quote, "My dad was great, but my mom was bad. And I don't want to see her face ever because she killed my dad in front of my eyes. She kept a pillow on my dad's face and asked Gurpreet to slit his throat."
Well,
That's it.
there you see now how she was tied to the actual homicide itself by instructing her lover to go through with this while she held the pillow on his face. And why she still got that pillow there? Is it because she's trying to keep from looking into his face, turn him into an object rather than this human that she created some form of a life with? Or was it really an attempt to smother him and it just wasn't working? I don't know.
I don't know if she wanted to be in Dubai with her lover. And that was the most important thing, which clearly was, because I don't believe that she was considering the welfare of her two children based on her actions. Then she just should have run away to Dubai to be with this guy and be done with it. Be done with it. It would still be a traumatic experience for those children and for the husband, but I think one they could work through a little bit better.
I would agree with that.
Oh,
Yeah.
goodness. So
A lifetime of injury now for those
lifetime
children.
of injury, and no one doing this trauma, no one doing it.
Yeah.
So throughout the trial, Ramdeep verbally attacked her mother-in-law. Now, the mother-in-law is one of the victims here, along with the children. Her son has been brutally murdered in her home by her daughter-in-law. And her grandchildren saw this. So, even the defense attorney, even Ramdeep's attorney said, yeah, she was abusive to the mother-in-law who was clearly grieving. So she didn't win any points with the court. I get that. We'll have all sorts of defendants who do horrific things during trials, which honestly do not do themselves any favors, especially if they, don't show any remorse and so on. And yes, that to a degree does count in sentencing, which is the discretion of the judge. I get that. But what's just so fascinating is that her, the way she treated the mother-in-law just undid the judge. So Ramdeep was found guilty and sentenced to death last month. In a 75-page ruling, the judge cited Ramdeep's harassment of the victim's mother during the trial. And I guess, Mike, isn't that maybe the equivalent of not showing remorse and being difficult during a trial here, that you would take note of that at sentencing? We've heard judges, speak to defendants about that.
I don't have a bit of a problem with a judge saying your demeanor in court or your personalized attacks or things like that were troubling throughout this entire court proceeding. I guess what I have trouble with is when it becomes part of the sentence.
Yeah. Okay. I hear you. I want to hear from all of you. What do you all think? Do you believe that her actions in court should be taken into account at the time of sentencing? I'm just curious. I'm really curious here. So in India, the death penalty apparently is rarely used, and it's reserved for the most heinous of offenses. In the ruling, the judge also cited Ramdeep's lack of remorse, which is important. Judges do consider that. And this to me was the most fascinating. And the unlikely chance of rehabilitation. The judge is like, yeah, this woman, she's not changing. So the judge concluded, quote, she should be given capital punishment because if she is not given strict punishment, then every mother would think 1,000 times before admitting her daughter-in-law into the home. Ba-dum-bum. Bam. Is that something?
It would have been hard not to smile, at least in that courtroom. Again, I'm thinking, Judge, you have someone who, if everything sounds the way it sounds to me, planned out a homicide, that she put a life insurance policy in place in order to benefit and profit from it, that she picked a location where she thought she could get away with murder. And if it didn't work, she could use some of the money she earned in the murder to buy her way out of the country. And then she purposely drugged the food of the family, everyone but herself, in hopes that they would all be asleep and that she could smother her husband. And when the smothering didn't work, by all accounts, she gets her boyfriend to sneak into the house with a knife that he brings to the scene, which means he didn't come there with the idea that they were going to just kiss on the balcony. He came there to commit a murder. That, to me, is aggravating enough. You don't need to hear the fact that they don't like each other at the parental level.
Yeah, it's so interesting that he's doing it for every mother out there. Otherwise, they will be afraid of letting their daughter-in-law in the door, that he has got to set the tone for every mother-in-law and protector in India for fear of who might walk in the door, that it could be a killer. I'm like, wow, that's a really broad way of looking at this one crime affecting one family. It was so interesting to me. Now, the attorneys for Ramdeep have appealed this death sentence. And I think, Mike, you kind of laid out the whole case there. So if you say that you will hang someone, sentence them to death based on how egregious a case is, on those standards in this community, I believe that's probably enough. I don't think the whole mother-in-law is what tipped it over. Being mean to the mother-in-law, I don't think tipped the scales in favor of a hanging here for this convicted killer. But I think the fact that the judge said that, it could be very interesting to see what the upper courts think as this is appealed, because her attorneys are like, we're appealing this. Judge is totally out of line in including that in his sentencing decision. And they're thinking, well, maybe at the very least, she's never going to walk, but maybe she'll get life in prison. And that's what they're trying to do. They just say the whole thing is ridiculous. You cannot. And then their comment, which I shared at the top of the podcast about, boy, if that's the threshold that we're going to have here, that, you're going to hang every woman who is mean to her mother-in-law, we're not going to have a lot of daughters-in-law still alive in the country.
Yeah, that really is for the goodwill of the country, but not the criminal justice system.
No. So what is interesting is that Ramandeep's accomplice here, her former lover, obviously, right? Gurpreet Singh, the man who slit the throat, he was sentenced to life in prison and he was spared death. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, that really is. And I guess what the court is doing is saying he was working under the direction of her. So in essence, to use the old ritual crime days where religious leaders would have someone else commit a homicide, this person is the voice of reason and planning, but this person gets to be the arm of it to do the dirty work.
The two boys are living in London with their paternal uncle, so their father's brother. Very interesting that the boys are being raised by the father's side of the family. It's just a sad story. I mean, it is a tragic, tragic story, but I can't wait to hear what you all think about the judge's sentence. True Crime Daily, the podcast, is sponsored by BetterHelp. Sometimes it's hard to know if you're making the right decision, or you say to yourself, let me sleep on it, but you end up rolling around all night with these racing thoughts. Do you ever feel like your brain is just getting in its own way? It's like you know what you should do and what's good for you, but you just can't do it. Therapy helps to figure out what's holding you back so you can work for yourself instead of against yourself. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Therapy can help in so many ways. If you need to weigh the pros and cons of a decision or just need a sounding board, talking to a therapist can help. Make your brain your friend with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/TrueCrimeDaily today to get 10% off of your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/TrueCrimeDaily. Our next case is out of Austin, Texas, and it is one that we have been watching from the very beginning here on the podcast. It is finally going to trial. This is the case of the pro cycling love triangle that ended in murder. The jury was picked on Monday for the trial of Caitlin Armstrong, who is 36 years old. She's accused of killing professional cyclist Ana Maria Mo, she's referred to as Mo, Wilson, who was 25 at the time. Now, when she was shot dead, when Mo was killed on May 11th, 2022, this all occurred in Austin. She didn't live there. Mo came in for a race. So Mo briefly dated Caitlin's boyfriend, Colin Strickland, who is also a professional cyclist. So here you have the love triangle. You have Colin, who's a professional cyclist, who's in a relationship with Caitlin, who is a yoga instructor, and then he meets Mo at a time when he and Caitlin are broken up for something like 2 weeks. They have an affair. He continues to communicate with him. There's some with her. There's some question as to whether the relationship continued. And at the end of the day, you have Caitlin, who is very angry, and police and prosecutors are saying she had the motive. She was betrayed. They're painting her out to have stalked Mo and to have planned this because, in Caitlin's eyes, according to prosecutors, Mo was her rival. So the case The jury was selected on Monday. Today, we had opening arguments. And, opening arguments to me are always fascinating because it's literally like two radically different views of what happened. And the truth is somewhere in the middle, I always say.
Yeah, this one's going to be an interesting one because cameras aren't allowed in the courtroom, so we're not going to get to see. We're going to have to rely on what the reporters are releasing. But this one looks like it's heating up already.
Oh yeah, it was getting a bit testy there, even just in opening statements.
Yes, it
really
was.
Testy. The crime is this. This is the allegation that Caitlin allegedly schemed to kill off her rival, but in doing so, twice Caitlin has evaded authorities. The first time after the cyclist is killed, Caitlin disappears and there's like an international manhunt for her. And then literally days before this trial is supposed to begin, Caitlin slips out of custody at a doctor's appointment off-site from the jail. Is that unbelievable? And she takes off and runs.
Yeah, and watching the video, I mean, gosh, obviously there was a terrible breakdown in security there. But I'm still kind of scratching my head over the fact that they acknowledge that they're watching her work out aggressively for months as this thing is coming to a head, and that she is claiming she has an injury, somehow working through the injury, but she needs to go to a doctor. And of course, they drop their guard and she almost gets away.
She almost got away. She was so clever because that's right. She was working crazily, right? Exercising at the jail facility and they're watching her. She claims to get this injury and she convinces the sheriff and the custodians there at the jail that they can't put the leg chains or the leg irons on her because it's a leg injury and they're taking her to a doctor off-site to be treated for this injury. She was so clever, she knew that she needed not to have the leg chains in order to run away. So once she gets in there into the doctor's visit, I guess the security doesn't go in with her because she has rights. And so she manages to get, they wear certain states literally have the striped jail outfits, and in Texas they have the stripes. And if you're from another state and then you're visiting and all of a sudden you see literally what's like a chain gang, you're like, oh my God, is this the 1950s? And where is Johnny Cash singing? I remember being at a courthouse in Texas, looking out the window and thinking, am I seeing this correctly? And, other states have orange jumpsuits. I'm like, it's something very dramatic that many states no longer have, but Texas does. So she was wearing her thermals underneath. So I think you could be running down a street in your like Long John thermals, and I don't think anyone would think anything of it.
Not anymore. You're right.
No. So she was very clever that way. She manages, the authorities say, this is based on court records, that they had found like a pin and a few other things in her cell after they finally captured her that indicated to them that she had come up with a way to get out of her handcuffs, because I guess they left the handcuffs on at some point. There's a little bit is murky here, but she manages to get out of her handcuffs, and then she takes her prison garb off, and that's when she runs. And she'd been training for months, so she ran like lightning. Trying to scale this 6-foot fence. The cops are trying to like grab her foot. They manage to grab her. She tumbles down. They capture her. They've now charged her, with this. And the judge ruled this escape could be introduced into her current murder trial. And they talked about it today. At opening statements.
Yeah, and boy, that's going to be a tough hill to climb, because she can go in and say, look, I was just freaking out because I've been wrongly accused and I needed to escape. but she's needed to escape apparently since she got incarcerated because she's been working out and planning it. And I think they'll introduce, like you say, evidence that suggests that she had a plan in place. I wonder if there was an accomplice in place to pick her up on the other side of that wall. It makes you wonder all kinds of things, but it goes back to the amount of sophistication that this individual has had from point A to through to today when we're walking into court.
She is a slippery one. So I want to play some clips from today's opening statements, and then we'll get into the details of the case. So let's start with the prosecution and then hear from the defense.
The last thing Mo did on this earth was scream in terror. And you hear those screams. There's a surveillance camera with an audio portion to it. We'll play that for you. And you'll hear those screams. Those screams are followed by ah, ah, 2 gunshots. One to the front of the head, one to the side of the head that hits the index finger as it passes. You won't hear any more screams out there.
Now, the state just discussed with you what you will see, what you will hear about, what you will hear throughout the course of this trial. But I want to talk to you about what you didn't hear about. What you didn't hear about. You didn't hear that not one witness saw Caitlin Armstrong allegedly commit this murder. Not one. Because there isn't one. You won't hear, and you didn't hear, about any camera footage showing Caitlin Armstrong at the scene of this shooting. Despite there being tons of cameras in the area, and you heard opening statements about all the cameras that were in the immediate vicinity of the scene of that shooting, not one captures Caitlin Armstrong at that scene.
Mike, for me, the most chilling thing that I heard today in the opening statements, the prosecutor said that security cameras that had audio capabilities picked up Mo's screams as she was being shot dead, and that they're going to play her screams for the jury, as if preparing and bracing the jury for what you are about to hear and see in this trial.
Yeah, I don't think people have any idea what court officers and jurists and the people who are going to choose to sit in this trial to watch and observe are going to experience and feel. It is horrendous when these cases are played out and the evidence comes to light. And it really points to the fact that maybe it made good sense that the judge said, I'll let a camera do your opening statements, but I'm not going to let it just show all the evidence. And we've seen in a number of trials that have been going on recently where they prevent us in the public from seeing what's visualized for the court and for the jury. But murder is an ugly business, and it is going to be graphic and disappointing for anyone who's there. I think you can't shoot someone and not have a horrendous sight, especially when those are gunshots to the face or the head and the chest.
Yes, it's a gruesome crime scene. A young life has been taken. It's very sad. All these cases, they're just tremendously sad because of the amount of loss, the loss of human life. Let's get back to the details and the history of the 3 people involved in this triangle. So Caitlin Armstrong and Colin Strickland began dating back in 2019. That was 3 years before the murder. So for about 2 weeks in October of 2021, the couple broke up. So in this 2-week breakup pause, that's when Colin meets Mo Wilson, who's another professional cyclist, and the two date briefly. Okay, now, Mo and Colin had a lot in common because of the professional cycling. And Keep in mind that Caitlin was very athletic. Clearly, the woman bolted recently. She's escaped twice. She's very fit. She's a yoga instructor. And the prosecution and police have made a big deal about the fact that Caitlin was jealous and that she had tried to go cycling with her boyfriend Colin, but Colin never wanted to go with Caitlin because she slowed him down. Okay, understandable. The man is a professional. They're just, I don't know, if you were dating a professional tennis player and you were an amateur tennis player, would you think that your professional partner would really want to play with you? I don't know.
Yeah.
One is work. I don't know. But again, it's all about the prosecution painting Caitlin as being incredibly jealous, which I think is fairly accurate. So then Colin and Caitlin get back together, they move in, and at the time of Mo's murder, they were living together. Mo did not live in Texas. So the triggering event here is Mo comes into town for a race that Colin's going to be in, and that is when police say Caitlin comes undone. Okay, we've talked about this a lot in love triangles. There are two things here that I just... Human behavior, again, that I want to discuss. Two things. When someone in a love triangle feels betrayed and goes after someone, they go one of two ways. They either try to harm the one that they're in the relationship with, right? The one who's cheating on them, or they go after the other person who has nothing to do with them. And in this case, authorities say Caitlin, rather than having it out with Colin, decides just to eliminate the other woman. It's always so fascinating to me.
This just blows my mind, Anna, how it happens over and over again. The person that's hurting you isn't the one that you're focusing your aggression on. You're focusing it on this other individual who may or may not even know of your relationship or the state of your relationship. And how we end up seeing over and again the predator focusing on that offshoot individual rather than the person they're connected with who's violated their trust and their relationship is beyond me.
It's always interesting to me how people handle these problems. And I always say murder is not a problem-solving solution. This is not going to fix whatever's going on in your relationship. Getting rid of this woman in this horrific manner is not going to make things better. Clearly. Because one woman is dead. Another woman is sitting in jail awaiting a murder trial, right? And to hear her sentence. How is this improving anything? You think Colin is going to get back together with you after all this, even if you're deemed innocent by a jury? Please. Let's be real here. Yeah. So I never ever understand that. However, Colin, apparently, police believe that he was still in a relationship with Mo and that he had placed her contact information in his phone under a different name. So as Caitlin, his partner, could not find her information in the phone. Now, keep in mind that it was brought out today in trial that Caitlin and Colin had a business together. They shared an iPad. And the prosecution is saying because of sharing that iPad, she had access to the cloud, she had access to all his text messages, his emails. And so they're portraying her as a woman who is out there trying to get all the information and is, literally stalking her partner to figure out what in the world is going on. Well, on the night that Mo is murdered, she had spent the afternoon with Colin. They went swimming, then they went to dinner. And when Caitlin was texting her boyfriend to ask where he was deceptive. He lied about where he was and what he was doing. And then on top of it, when he finally gets home and then Caitlin finally gets home that night, he's asking her, hey, you want to go grab dinner? The man's just had dinner with another woman. So if she knows all of this, which she did based on her stalking him, you are only further infuriating her, right? I'm sure he didn't think that she was going to get out and allegedly kill someone, but.
No, you're right. You're right. And there's a big difference between saying, "Hey, I had a business meeting with Mo. I know that you don't like Mo, but it was really important because this is my profession and that's what I do." But I don't know many business meetings that involve going swimming and dinner together. At least I've been married 46 years now, so it's been a while since I dated. But it doesn't seem like the normal business meeting to me.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, love triangles. The very, very dangerous things. Very dangerous. So on the day that Mo was murdered, this is May 10th, as we've said, she went swimming with Colin, then went to dinner. By 8:36, Mo returns to this home. She's staying with a friend of hers. There's a keypad. She has a unique code. And so police say based on that and her phone, they know what time she got into the residence. 8:36. A minute later, 8:37, security footage, this is according to prosecutors, catches what they believe is Caitlin's Jeep outside. Now, the defense has already said today in opening arguments, they're like, well, you may see the Jeep, but you don't see Caitlin. And the defense is saying, you cannot put Caitlin at the scene. Prosecution's going to argue that between phone, surveillance. They say that they have DNA evidence that there was Caitlin's DNA on the handlebars and the seat of Mo's bicycle, which had been tossed and found near the home where she was staying. So again, that's the evidence that prosecutors say they're going to present. And the defense is saying, well, look, you've got a lot of security cameras here, right? So why don't we physically see Caitlin? That's what they're saying. Who knows until trial, this is all presented at trial. So by the time Caitlin returns home to the home that she shares with Colin, it is 9:21 and Colin is home waiting for her. That's when he says, hey, you want to go grab a bite to eat? About 10 p.m., the actual owner of the home returns. This is where Mo is staying. The door is unlocked. Nothing appears to be missing, except later they find out her bicycle is missing. Mo is found bleeding in the bathroom. Now, prosecutors say that when the friend walked in and saw Mo on the ground, they first saw a leg. So they thought that she was stretching. The initial feeling was, oh my God, she must be stretching, getting ready for tomorrow's race. But that was not the case. She had been shot several times. And then, 911 is called and Mo cannot be saved. Mo cannot be saved. So the way police backtrack everything, they want to know who Mo was with, and that was Colin. Colin, his GPS, his phone, has him at his home at the time that they believe that she's murdered because he had a motorcycle and dropped Mo off at the home that she was staying, and then he went home. So they're able to figure all this out. Why Caitlin and really Colin become a little bit suspicious is because of that Jeep. That Jeep is registered to their home, to the home that Caitlin and Colin share. So this is where things get even more interesting. Police, of course, interview Colin as the last person to have seen her alive. But then they interview Caitlin, but they pick Caitlin up on an unrelated old warrant. They pick her up, question her, and then because there is an issue with the warrant, it's either not valid or there's a technicality, they say to Caitlin, okay, you're free to go. So Mike, from your perspective as a former police officer, because it came up today in opening arguments and I thought was so interesting, the defense is saying, so what she went to Costa Rica? They're saying she was told, you're free to go. Therefore, you can go anywhere you want. You haven't been charged. You haven't been warned. But, ultimately, she is the person that they're looking for. So how do you think a jury is going to look at this? Was it suspicious for her to take off? I mean, there's a lot of other stuff we're going to get to about what happened in Costa Rica, but what do you make of this?
Well, from an investigative standpoint, I think, and hopefully from the prosecution's presentation of this, you have to prove that, or at least present that these were motions to evade any kind of responsibility for this thing. And so, number one, you're going to be able to tie things together, like some of the forensics you've talked about, the fact that they recover a weapon later and it matches up, those kinds of things. But once you're talking to her, some people are frustrated because law enforcement let her go on the warrant and didn't just charge her right then if they had a feeling. Well, you know how difficult that is, because if you move too quickly, you could be in a position where you have to either drop charges and kind of regroup, or you might lose the entire thing altogether. So you've got to move in a really expeditious but judicious way. And so the fact that they did that, I'm wondering if it could be even played out that they wanted to use that warrant, knowing it's not very good, to question her, to have a little deeper conversation, turn up the heat a little bit, and then watch her. The problem is they didn't watch her, because she boards a plane to Houston. She jumps on a different plane from Houston. And before that, I got to mention, she puts her car up for sale the immediate next day and takes cash for that, gets that cash, and starts putting together this escape plan where she then goes to Houston. From Houston, she goes, I think, to Newark, if I remember right.
Yeah.
And then she makes her way up through the woods to a sister who miraculously ends up being the same passport that she uses to then fly to Costa Rica. And so I think you start building on from this thing, the fact that she's bouncing from location to location. I suspect she could have flown from Austin to Costa Rica. I suspect she could have flown from Houston to Costa Rica if she was going on vacation and just getting a little getaway. She certainly could have from Newark, but then she does it on a cheap airline from JFK, or I think from LaGuardia is where she actually ends up taking the jump. But all of that is building stones to separate herself from this mess that's occurring down in Austin, Texas. And that's what I'd be pushing if I were the prosecution. This says, suggesting she's trying to get away from this thing and anything to do with it.
Especially because U.S. Marshals say she used her sister's passport to get out of the country.
Exactly. And then how many people go to Costa Rica to change their identity and the way they look?
Well, we can all use a little tune-up every once in a while, but according to the prosecution, she had plastic surgery while she was on the run. And the prosecution said today they're going to show the jury the before and after photos taken by the plastic surgeon in Costa Rica to show you how she changed her appearance, and she also darkened her hair significantly. She was under an assumed name. So no, this is not sounding like a little vacation that, it's a very stressful situation right now in Texas and I'm going to take a little trip to Costa Rica. No, it is sounding like someone who is running and hiding from authorities. I just thought it was fascinating that the defense is saying, no, this is just a little trip she planned. Just a little
side trip.
Just a little trip.
She was under a lot of stress.
She's under stress. The yoga teacher needed to relax. So, yeah, she sold her car for $12,000. This is the day after she is interrogated by the police on that other warrant. Yeah. And she's gone. She has the money. And I think the plastic surgery, there was a receipt that was found that was for $6,000. So half of her car money went to her face. And then the remainder was, I guess, her, money to live on. Caitlin was on the run for 40 days. Marshals found her on June 29th of 2022 in a hostel in Santa Teresa Beach. She was finally brought back to the United States and to Texas. Now, she has the entire time maintained her innocence. She has pleaded not guilty to first-degree murder, and she has been held the entire time on a $3.5 million bond since her arrest, except for, a few days before trial when she decides to go for a marathon run away from the authorities while at the doctor's office. She's amazing.
Physical therapy. That was physical therapy.
She's fascinating, this one. What a slippery one. So on October 11th is when she makes her big escape from the doctor's office. And, while she's at this phony baloney doctor's visit, she takes off. This is amazing, amazing. So Caitlin is not only facing the murder charge, but also this charge for bolting, which is a charge of escape causing bodily injury. And so that will be a separate case that she will have to deal with. Now, according to the Daily Mail, prior to Caitlin's escape, prosecutors offered her a plea deal. Fascinating, okay?
Wow.
According to the Daily Mail's reporting, the plea deal would have shaved years off of her sentence. Allegedly, we're hearing, based on their reporting, that the plea deal would have allowed Caitlin to exit in her 50s or 60s. She denied. She said no. She rejects the plea deal. And now she's facing murder one, which if she is convicted, she could face the possibility of life in prison without parole. She's taking her chances. This is a woman who clearly believes in taking chances. So I think she's just like, she's totally sticking to it. It's going to be a very interesting case. We're going to watch it. And the question is, will Caitlin take the stand?
Makes you wonder, doesn't it? And I go back to this idea that the prosecution offered a plea negotiation. They wouldn't do that, I don't believe, without Mo's family agreeing to that up front to avoid having this horrendous homicide discussed and some of the dynamics discussed. And gosh, I wish they could have figured something out. I mean, everybody wants this mega pound of salt when we have these cases, but there's a lot more victims in this thing than just Mo Wilson now. But now this idea of whether she would take the stand, and you see this level of arrogance and this fact that I'm going to take this thing head on. And this is one that could surprise us by taking the stand. We've certainly seen that in a few big cases lately.
Agreed. Not always the wisest decision. I always say, if you can truly explain the things that don't make sense to the jury, well, it's a crapshoot and maybe take it. But if you can't, if you absolutely can't explain these giant holes, then you probably shouldn't take the stand. You should just take your chances and see if there's someone on the jury who's like, I'm not sure about the evidence.
Yeah, and there's such a feeling right now of distrust in government and everything else. I mean, I feel like I'm seeing this happen in defense strategies in a number of areas where they're really going after the integrity of the investigation. And maybe that is an angle because, like you say, you only need to get a few people to agree that there's question in this thing. But gosh, there just seems to be such a distrust right now in the judicial process that could be an angle. Taking the stand, I would think her defense attorneys would be trying to sit on top of her to keep her from doing that.
And to keep her from escaping. I mean, twofold with this one.
That's
All
true.
right.
Court security could be rather intense on this one, couldn't it?
Yeah. We'll be watching this case. It is time for our comments section. Now, these are the cases that you all are talking about on social media, but today we have a special guest and I am like so crazy excited. Not only is Will, our producer, joining us, but we have one of our listeners joining us. Yay, I'm so excited. I can't believe it. We said that when we hit 5 million subscribers that we would love to have one of you join us on the podcast to have a discussion about crime, and it is finally happening. Everyone, please welcome Nicole Freevold from Boston. Nicole, now when you wrote to me, you said that you are a semi-professional badminton player and you listen to us when you're going to practice.
Yes. Well, first of all, Anna, thank you so much for having me. I feel like I'm doing a pretty good job of containing my excitement, but I am freaking out on the inside. I can promise you that. Yeah, I know. Because when you were first speaking about, we love to hear about how you listen to our podcast. And I'm like, I feel like that's probably a pretty uncommon thing to get someone who's training for badminton and listening to it on the car ride. So yeah.
So true. I was like, really? A professional badminton player? You go into competitions even internationally. I'm like, wow, you have elevated our fan base to like professional status here.
I don't know about, well, you already have 5 million subscribers, so I think you did that yourself.
Now, just a little bit more about you. I feel like we're like on Jeopardy or Wheel of Fortune where we bring on the contestant. Let's hear a little bit more about Nicole, before we get to our crime in the comment section. So, Nicole, you also work at a law firm?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. And do you want to go into law school? You want to go to law school? What do you want to do?
Yeah, it's funny that you ask. So I currently am a legal assistant at the law office of Matthew Peterson. That's a firm in Boston. We do family, immigration, and mostly we do criminal defense. And it's funny that you asked about law school. I just got my LSAT score back this morning.
Yes.
And I'm very happy with my score in all transparency. So I plan on applying for law school for the fall of 2024.
Oh my gosh, this is so exciting. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Congratulations. And I know we're going to get to the case, but so Nicole, like really, thank you for listening to us. I so appreciate it. But like, why this podcast over there's so many great podcasts out there.
So I do listen to other podcasts here and there, but I really do always come back to True Crime Daily. First of all, Anna, I think you're hysterical. I just think you're so funny. Also, I love your guests on the show. They all just have such different perspectives that I love hearing about. And it's funny, Anna, I feel like when I'm thinking of a question or I'm like, why would they do this? Or I have some sort of question in my head, you ask it immediately after I'm thinking it. And I'm like, oh, this is great. I get my question answered immediately after I've thought it. So I love your guests. I love you. And I just think it's a great program.
Oh my God.
That's so good to hear.
Thank you, Nicole. Look at this. My microphone is shaking. It's so excited. It's so happy. It's trembling with joy. Okay. And Mike, I mean, this is great. I mean, Mike King is like a legend in crime solving, and you just get to be on the same program with him. This is so cool. Okay. So we're going to let Will take over now. Everyone, the comment section will begin now.
All right, so this case we have an alleged bad trip leading to a near mile-high disaster. This case comes out of Portland, Oregon, where a 44-year-old off-duty pilot was arrested on over 160 charges. A lot of charges here after he allegedly attempted to cut power to the plane's engines mid-flight and was deemed a security risk, which I feel like, yeah, bare minimum. Yes. If you're trying to shut down the power to the engines, it's probably a security risk. So this all occurred on October 22nd on a flight that was boarding in Everett, Washington, actually, and it was headed for San Francisco. The suspect here is Joseph Emerson. Now, he has been a pilot for over 22 years, experienced guy here, and he was off duty. Got to note that he was off duty during the boarding of the flight. He was allowed to join the departure as a passenger, but they seated him in the jump seat, one of those little jump seats in the flight deck. So he's in there, with the first assistant and the captain and all that. Now, according to Alaska Airlines, which is the flight where this took place, nobody could tell if he was impaired in any way. It didn't seem like outwardly anything was going on there, not that they could detect. But at some point during the flight, Joseph starts not having a very good time. Now, according to Joseph's wife, he had been kind of struggling with depression and anxiety lately. Apparently, it got worse every year around the anniversary of like a friend's death, which had just occurred. This is like just a side note here. Apparently, and this is, I read this in a Portland report, getting help for mental health struggles for pilots can be kind of difficult. They're required to basically self-report any physical or mental ailments. And sometimes like going to a therapy or reporting a mental health event can get a pilot suspended. So kind of weird thing going on there. But there are some other compounding factors that kind of make this little, maybe a little bit more culpability. So during the flight, Joseph later told investigators he was extremely depressed. He might have even said, "I'm not okay," while in the cockpit. And he said, allegedly said that the pilots, he thought they weren't really paying attention to what was going on. So he's really kind of freaking out here. And he goes to a very extreme. He tries to engage the emergency fire handle for the engine. Now, apparently this handle, it shuts off fuel to the engine. In case of a fire, it'll shut off any fuel, completely disabling the engine. And at this point, the captain and the first officer, they snap to attention. They're able to reset the fire handle, which prevented the disruption of anything happening in the engine. And Joseph later apparently told investigators that he pulled both emergency shutoff handles because he thought he was dreaming and he wanted to wake up. Not great there.
Of
all right,
all
so
the things to focus on, if you think you're having a dream, is the emergency handle that's going to force the plane to like glide down? Really? That's all? That's the one thing he is going to bring him out of his dream?
well, and I feel like when you're having a even in a dream like that, that's not like my first instinct, right? Like I don't know if you've ever had, a bad dream on a flight or in school or whatever. It's not like I don't never think of like pulling the fire alarm or like something like that is going to make it stop, We do cover a lot of dreams on here, dreams and fast food. Anyways, so because of this, the flight attendants were forced to restrain Joseph here. They put him in wrist restraints, which, they have those little like zip tie handcuff things. And then they have to like belt him in a different jump seat. This one's at the back of the plane. Now, reportedly, things continue to escalate here. Joseph reportedly tried to open the emergency exit before he was again stopped by a crew member.
Was that another dream? Yes?
Yeah, I don't know. That one actually, to me, makes a little bit more sense than taking the whole plane down. But it still wouldn't be my first thought. It still would not be my first thought. Now, okay, because of this disruption, obviously things have gotten very out of hand. The flight is diverted to Portland International Airport. Joseph immediately taken into custody. And this is where things get a little bit worse for Joseph. Like, bad dream, mental health episode. I feel like you have a plausible defense there, right, Nicole? I feel like as a criminal defense attorney, there's something you can work with there.
Yeah.
Sure.
But here, he apparently tells investigators that he had not slept in over 40 hours and he had taken mushrooms prior to the incident. According to police, Joseph said
mushrooms.
Joseph said that he had never taken the drug before and was having a nervous breakdown.
Well, that's probably true.
Which, okay.
Right? Isn't it possible he had a bad reaction to mushrooms? I mean, that's totally plausible.
Totally. But like,
I just have so many questions. Questions.
Like what? What?
So first of all, it looks like he claimed to have taken the drug 48 hours before that incident. And from my understanding, I really know very little about mushrooms.
Oh,
but
come on,
from my
Nicole,
understanding, from full transparency, I know very little about mushrooms, but full transparency, you would have had to take so much of that drug for it to still be having effects on your body, from my understanding.
Yeah,
and
there's no way.
The fact that no one thought that he was maybe off or something just is confusing to me. Also, I'm just picturing, so I'm kind of a stressful flyer to begin with because I just don't like the turbulence. But to have this going on while I'm in flight as a passenger,
oh my God.
I'm just trying to picture all of this happening.
Oh,
well, and it's someone who like
scared to death.
Yeah, I feel like it's even more scary when it's someone like that was in the flight deck, right? You're like, oh my God, how could this be possibly any worse? But yeah, for a nervous flyer, Nicole, I mean, that seems terrible. I do have some questions about that timeline, though, because he said he hadn't slept for 40 hours, but he had taken the mushrooms 48 hours earlier. So I'm a little confused. Like, he took the mushrooms, whatever. He took the mushrooms, fell asleep for 8 hours, and then was awake. I don't know. I can't really understand the timeline.
I mean, without question, the man is struggling, and he is not well.
He is not well.
And then why was he allowed to fly? I get it. You do see that. You'll see people in jump seats, and then you'll see like these extra people in the cockpit. It happens. I guess you're allowed, if you're a pilot, right, to fly in there. But maybe this is something that the airlines should change their policy on. Maybe we should only have people focused on the flight inside the cockpit. That's all. Yeah. That's just a theory. Just a thought, tossing it out there.
Well, Mike, I mean, you did study psychology. I mean, if one of your colleagues, this guy's been a pilot for 21 years, asked to hop on the plane, like reasonably, I mean, you have no reason to believe that something like this could ever occur.
Yeah. I'm really, on this particular case, I think a couple of things really come to the surface for me. One is the help line doesn't seem to be working. Yeah. And there's got to be a way that people in a profession can say, I'm struggling and I have a problem, and not feel that their job is going to be in jeopardy as they go through that process. And many organizations have that through their employee assistance program. The fact that they allow pilots up into the front doesn't bother me at all. It's nice to have another set of eyes there. I don't know that you could ever create some kind of a quick check system to say this person's sane, so we're letting them through the door. Otherwise, I guess it goes back to the same thing that stops law enforcement all the time, and that would be called profiling. And we just don't profile people. The third part of this is that I keep thinking about is that thankfully, law enforcement doesn't have to make decisions about the emotional state of somebody or something else. They have elements of crime, and if those elements are met, then you charge someone and you hand it over to a prosecutor, or you arrest them, you hand it over to a prosecutor to charge them, and then over to a court to adjudicate that thing and try to bring in expert witnesses to say it's good or it's bad. But this whole thing brings up a terrifying situation for people who are sitting in the airplane just wanting to get to San Francisco. And that's the part I keep going back to. And I got one last thing to say, and that is, I got to hear a Bostonian accent if I'm going to listen to a girl from Boston.
Harvard Yard. That's the best I got. Fortunately, I don't have a Boston accent because people would be saying stuff to me all the time. But I guess I'm lucky in that way, maybe.
Okay.
Is that where you grew up as well?
Did you grow up there?
I'm from Marblehead.
Okay.
It's
so
a small
still
coastal
Massachusetts.
town. Yeah, still Massachusetts. It's a small coastal town about 45 minutes from Boston.
You know, my son says that accents are going away. My son's 24, and and he lives in New York, and I'm always curious about, like, he says he doesn't hear that incredible New York accent as much as, let's say, you would have when I was growing up there, or like how some of my friends talk, or how like I can sound if I get angry, you know, and the accent comes out. I find that interesting because, I mean, do you see that among your friends, that they don't have the Boston accent like in New York? It seems to be going away.
Yeah, that's so funny. I know. I don't necessarily think about it, but yeah, I mean, none of my friends have Boston accents.
Completely derailed us from true crime. I'm so sorry.
I'm sorry.
No, we love it. That's what this section is all about.
What are we tackling next in world problems and issues in pop culture? Oh my gosh. Okay, well, I'm sorry. Handing it back to you. Go on.
All right. So getting back to the passengers, all got rerouted on a new flight, continued their respective journeys without incident. Things were not as lucky for Joseph here. He has been booked on 83 counts of attempted murder and 83 counts of reckless endangerment, along with 1 count of endangering an aircraft. And there might be some additional federal things that could happen as well. So it's a lot there. Unclear what the situation is going to be, or at the very least, he's been suspended indefinitely from Alaska Airlines, and we'll see how this whole thing progresses. 83 counts of attempted murder, though.
That is
Nicole,
serious.
that seems like a lot. What do you think you're looking at there? That's probably life.
I know, that's funny. I was thinking, what is he going to get? Like 83 counts of a life sentence? I can't even imagine the kind of time he's facing. I'm assuming, I don't know if it would be the smartest thing to go forward with a trial. I'm assuming maybe he'll take a plea of some sort. I can't imagine what time he's facing. Also,
And get
one
him
thing I
help.
did. Yes, absolutely. And that's kind of what I was going to touch on. So I'm definitely not as qualified as Mike, but I actually studied psychology at my undergrad degree. And so I find it a little bit worrisome that these airlines are, trying to promote healthy mental health, yet not really saying, okay, well, you can come and report mental health issues to us without getting any ramifications in terms of, job loss or anything like that. So that would deter anyone from reporting themselves, in my opinion.
Yeah, totally. And depression and anxiety, like very serious, but
Very.
definitely not so incapacitating that you couldn't fly a plane.
Right.
Oh, it is tragic. It is, but it's also very frightening. The fact that he could have killed everyone on that plane. I agree with you, Nicole. I don't see him serving all those life sentences. I think this will be mitigated, I'm sure, as a first offense. I mean, it's serious, and he must, pay for this. But I think also getting him help is going to be, crucial at this point. Wow.
Yeah, totally clean employment record too. Like not, that no history or anything that I saw from any report that like failed drug tests, He had, completed all trainings and updates on safety and everything. Never really an issue before. So unfortunate situation. People had a lot to say about this one. Lucky S actually kind of gave some a different sort of insider peek that's a little scarier. They said, many years ago, I worked for a toxicology lab that did drug testing for major airlines, and it freaked me out how many positive tests we got back on pilots.
No.
Yeah, right? Don't you remember there was like a period of time though where there was like a couple, like a captains and stuff
drunk
where,
pilots. Yeah, there were a lot of drunk pilot situations. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not
Okay, you guys
good.
are making me never want to fly again.
Oh, I'm sorry.
my
You're
gosh,
increasing
yeah,
the
sorry.
plane's
You're
anxiety
already
here.
not a good flyer. Oh no. Adam B said, didn't think we needed a PSA to not take mushrooms before a flight, but here we are. I think that's where I would lean. Pilot or not, it's not the right environment. It's not the best environment, especially if it's your first time. I don't know what would compel you.
Trip.
Yeah, I don't know
It's
what
a
would
different
compel you
trip,
to be
not
like,
one on a plane.
yeah,
Oh, that's a
right.
good pun. That was a
Thank
good one.
you.
I've been trying
Thank
to figure out one. That's good.
Some people are much like Nicole, like we brought up, like people are very confused about like if this timeline is correct that they were taken 48 hours before. I don't understand how it all works out, but It Matters Not said, if anybody has ever had a mushroom trip last 48 hours, please post where you bought those mushrooms and the phone number of the guy. Which great. Don't do it in our comments section though. I don't want us to be to tie to any of that.
Mike's going to report us.
Yeah, right. That's the last thing we need. Name and Shames is ready for the movie adaptation of this. They said, from the producers of Cocaine Bear, mushrooms on a plane, right?
Snakes on a plane.
Yeah. And then our last comment is a reference to Friday, one of my favorite films. Charles M. said, how the heck you go and get fired on your day off? This is one way to do it. This is one way to do it.
Wow. Well, this has been quite a treat, quite a comment section. Oh, Nicole, it's been such a pleasure. I just have to ask you about your badminton. So, like, how often are you in these competitive badminton competitions?
Yeah, so I train about 5 or 6 days a week currently. And yeah, I mean, I would probably say every few months I attend a tournament. They're kind of sporadic. There's really no off season.
Did you play badminton in college as well? Or is this something you've done aside from school?
Yeah, this is something that I did outside of school. I actually began training when I was about 11 or 12.
Wow.
And I've been training since then.
Competitively.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
Yes.
I played when I was
Thank
11 and
you.
12 also, but somehow my career didn't go the same way that yours did in badminton. I do love badminton though. I mean,
It's a fun sport, right?
isn't it? It's total.
Yeah.
I used to play it in front of the house on the street with my son. Obviously, no nets, nothing, but it was just like such an easy thing to do. I've always loved badminton. Like, it's
It's
very
cool.
cool.
I think it's like one of the coolest racket sports.
Yeah. Do you feel like you're being, overshadowed by this whole pickleball thing?
Oh, yes. My mother is obsessed with pickleball. And I'm like, you traitor, because she used to play badminton. And then pickleball, I will say pickleball is pretty fun, but my mother plays like twice a day. She's crazy.
Oh my.
Totally. Yeah.
So funny, so funny. You know what? Let's just do a different kind of goodbye this time. Usually, like, we say goodbye to Will at this point, but why don't you all stay? We're going to do our goodbyes now because I don't want to say goodbye to you. I'm just so happy that you all are here. Nicole, this has been just a total pleasure meeting you. Thank you so much for reaching out. And you all know that I try and read your comments, your emails, or your DMs. I can't keep up with everybody, but I do the best that I can.
She does a great job, though.
I do. And we have such a great community on YouTube. That's what I love. I just love so many times someone will make a comment and I'll be like, oh my God, how did I miss that? Like something so glaring. And so I just love to read your comments. Mike, it's always a pleasure having you on. Where can people find you, follow you, all that good stuff, because you're so busy?
Always great to be with you, and Nicole, fun to meet you on here. Love being with Will. You can just find me at Profiling Evil, one word with the @ sign, no, not AT, and that'll get you to YouTube and the podcasts. And please come over and visit us. But thanks again, Anna. I just love every time I come on.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. Thank you so much. We always learn something from you. You can find me at Anna G News, Anna with one N, on all the socials. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel, to our 5 million strong crime family. We would love that. You can also subscribe to our newsletter. As I say, Will, it's so 1990s. I don't understand this whole newsletter. How do we still have a newsletter? Can you explain this to me?
I don't know. I just do it every week.
Really?
Yeah.
And does like anybody read this newsletter?
They do actually. It has like a really good. It has like a 35+% open rate, which is really good.
What does that mean?
If you're into email marketing.
Do you know something? I have never been sent the newsletter. I have no idea what this thing is like. Like nobody sends.
Sign up for the list. Go to truecrimedaily.com. Sign up for the newsletter. Come on, it's good stuff every week.
Maybe I'll learn something. Oh my gosh, I love it. Okay, so this episode, all our episodes, wherever you get your podcast, we'd love you to join us every week. Okay, as we always say at the end of the program, this is True Crime Daily, the podcast. I'm your host, Ana Garcia, and as we always say, don't do crime.